Hi, Mickey.
Hey, Bob.
What you got there? Is that what's his name? The guy who's running for president, or no? That's
It is, in fact, what's his name? And what is what's his name's name?
wait. I could come up with this if you gave me enough time because it's the same last name as a guy Steve Bannon used to have on his podcast. But let's just cut to the chase. Who is it, Mickey?
It's Vivek Ramaswamy.
Ramaswamy, of course.
Who is in this photo? He's revealed as a Soros fellow.
Mm-hmm.
A fact he would like to expunge from his bio, since he's running in the Republican primary. But he's an entrepreneur who is running on the an anti-woke platform, and he is a tremendous hit with the crowd. He's obviously one of the world's great talkers. If you're looking for a dark horse flavor of the month, he's the flavor of the month. Mm-hmm. Republican crowds love him. He's already sort of beating more seasoned pals like Mike Pence in early polls. He's moving into the number 3 position.
What's his percentage? What's he at? Like 8%?
Like 9, 8, something like that. Yeah.
That's not nothing. Not nothing.
No, he's a good talker. The donors love him, and he's built himself as a successful businessman. And he made billions with an IPO for a company that sort of bundled 18 different sort of drug companies with sort of drugs that big companies like Pfizer had dropped, and it sort of was pledging to find uses for them. And at the DeSantis retreat that I went to, the rap on him is that this was a failure. He's not a successful businessman. This company he brought to market, he managed to con investors into spending billions of dollars on it, and he pocketed some of that money himself. So he himself is rich, but the drug companies have not come up with any big successes. And if you look at their stock price, it's flat and falling since he left, and it's just not a success. So he's a fraud in that he's selling himself as a business success when he's not. What he is a great talker, and he frames the anti-woke message very effectively, including denying that he's anti-woke, apparently, according to Jonathan Weissman of the New York Times, who I don't quite trust.
Wait, he denies that he's anti-woke?
Yes, he said, I don't use that phrase. He may use another phrase that means the same thing, but he doesn't use that phrase. He's one of the great con men of our time. So it's until the press pays more scrutiny to him, he will continue to rise. And since the press is sort of soured on DeSantis, is looking for an alternative to Trump, they might boost him for a while before they discover that his businesses aren't successful.
And you are trying to burst his bubble by calling him a fraud because you're still on the DeSantis bandwagon, right?
Basically, but you get points for bursting a guy's bubble before other people, even if I'm not on the DeSantis bandwagon. It's the basic journalist scoop instinct, Bob.
Right, but I'm calling into question your motives and hence your integrity. You should be very insulted.
No, but I'm being honest about my motives.
So you're just a DeSantis shill.
I think DeSantis
would. I think DeSantis shill.
No, I just think this. It's becoming clear that it's becoming clear what we're getting with DeSantis. We're getting a competent governor who's quite conservative, talks smartly about politics, not a big people person, not a guy with a charismatic grand vision for America, which would be good, but don't expect it. Who would be an okay president, and he would not do some of the stupid things that Biden is doing, and he wouldn't do some of the stupid things that Trump is doing. He might do some stupid things of his own, but he's better than having Trump in again. He doesn't carry the risk of staging another attempt to rig an election, and he has nowhere to go but up here. I mean, he's not going to get less charismatic. Maybe he can come up with a Ted Sorensen type who can give him some stirring words, and he can be a little more charismatic.
Hey, have you thought about applying for that position?
I'm a very bad Ted Sorensen.
I was going to point that out. But
Ernest Hollings, when I worked for him, used to ask for the lift of a driving dream, which is what Richard Nixon used in one of his speeches, I think.
Mm.
And I don't think I came up with the list of a driving dream for him, although Hollings was a perfectly good speechwriter for himself. So he didn't need
I
me.
have something to say about DeSantis. You had told me that he has an annoying nasal voice. In fact, you had said it's even more annoying and nasal than mine, which is something scientists had previously said was impossible. But I was listening to him. I happened to be listening to him and not watching him for one of the first times ever. And you're right. It's like it is kind of nasal, and his accent. There's something just kind of ineffectual about his. It's an odd accent. I don't know where he grew up. It's not like Southern. It's not hardcore urban Eastern. It's kind of nothing. It's kind of weird. It's kind of like an effete suburban accent or something. What is it?
What is his accent? An effete suburban accent. I thought he claims to come from working class Pennsylvania stock.
I think it may. Effete is the wrong word. It's just kind of in the Netherlands. It's a kind of nondescript. It could be. It could almost be. Yeah, I think you're right.
He wasn't born. He wasn't. I don't think he was born in Pennsylvania. So.
But here's the good news. Here's the good news for him on the voice front. Have you heard Robert Kennedy talk?
No, he doesn't sound like Robert Kennedy Sr.
Oh God, it's weird. Maybe he was sick when I heard him. I heard him on a podcast. It's very strange. It's gravelly is too kind, because it sounds like it's a fragile, gravelly voice that makes it sound there's something wrong with him, like he's sick. It's really grating. It's really strange. Now, maybe it was just this one podcast. But they didn't mention that he was sick.
It doesn't inspire sympathy because he's vulnerable.
It is a really annoying sound.
You can fix him, Bob.
I'm available.
But he's. I still think he's a non-player, and DeSantis is a player in all this.
Well, he's obviously less of a
player either,
But Kennedy is at 20%, right? I mean, I think that's because nobody.
Oh, he's a player in that he could destroy Biden. He could do that.
I don't know that he could do that. I mean, first of all,
he could be like McCarthy and Lyndon Johnson. He could puncture the idea that Biden is inevitable, and other people gang up at him, and then he doesn't run.
I don't know. This was on the Unheard podcast. People can check it out. Maybe it's an aberration, and he doesn't usually sound like this, but I was very surprised.
Were you impressed? Some people are blown away by him.
I wouldn't say blown away. He doesn't sound crazy. I mean, of course, they kind of made a point of not getting into the vaccine stuff. They didn't get into his most vulnerable things. I mean, he is, he's a little bit of a conspiracy theorist and a little hyperbolic, like, the pandemic and what else? There were two things that supposedly people used to impose, quote, totalitarian policies. Well, if you look up the word totalitarian, that's probably going too far. So he's Ukraine? A little weird. What?
No. Is Ukraine one of them?
He didn't talk about that. Oh, but that's certainly part of his rap is we're wasting money on Ukraine. We've wasted money on all the other wars, Iraq and so on. He's a populist. He's a right wing. He's a left right populist.
Yeah. Disinformation is the totalitarian consequence of the COVID thing. So I can't come up with the other one.
No, but totalitarian is not the right word. Do you know what that word means? Yeah.
Totalitarian, I assume, means you control the totality of life, as in Orwell's 1984.
It's beyond authoritarian, right? It's like pervasive control.
As a man who's discovered that his grandfather was an anti-fascist working in a bookstore in Nazi Berlin.
That would be you, not Robert Kennedy?
That would be me. Even the Nazis weren't quite totalitarians. If you were Jewish, they killed you. But if we
got a slate pitch on Nazis coming up, folks. Take it away, Mickey.
No, that's been written actually, but
not so bad.
They weren't totalitarian. They missed my grandmother's passport when she was leaving. They weren't smart enough.
Maybe they weren't efficient
to look at all her passwords, so they weren't efficient enough to be completely totalitarian.
Maybe they weren't efficient, yes. But I do think they did the thing where your neighbor can turn you in if you say the wrong thing, right? And that's pretty
I think that's right. That's probably right. But they miss things, like my grandfather.
No, nobody's 100% competent.
No, I don't think they even. But I don't think. Well, They didn't bust him because he was an Italian citizen. How totalitarian is that? That's weird. Right? I mean, real totalitarians wouldn't let a little formality like that stand in the way. Anyway, I think there may be some truth to something that will never be investigated, which is that the Nazis weren't they were horrible and evil and awful, but they weren't quite as totalitarian as they might have been, or as future totalitarians will be.
Mm-hmm. I think you got a book in you there, Mickey.
Hitler's willingness executioners, but really they weren't totalitarians. Yeah. Okay.
Hitler's innocent executioners.
I don't think I'm going to write that book.
So, hey, you know what this thing happened? Oh, go ahead.
There's this podcast that did a nice analysis of my book, which was nice to see. And they're a little late to the party, Mickey. Your book was published in the previous millennium, was it not? And Bob,
yeah,
it's held up. No, it hasn't completely held up, but they're still talking about it on podcasts.
What podcast?
25 years later. Workers and Parasites, a libertarian podcast. Anyway, they're fans of us, Bob. That's all.
Then I have only the kindest words about them. I've long been an admirer of their podcast.
They even did a parody of the Parrot at the end of their podcast. So.
That's what we're looking for. You were mentioned on another podcast. You heard this, right? You were mentioned on the Fifth Column podcast.
That was a glancing mention by Matt Welch on.
Well, the weird thing, so you went and listened to it because you're the kind who would. Once you heard you were mentioned, you would go.
I listened to the part that mentioned me.
Yeah. What was weird was, as soon as they mention you, the phone goes off. Some phone goes off and distracts them. They might have spent a whole, 35 seconds on you otherwise.
I don't think so. Anyway, that was my friend Matt Welch who did it. So, but that was nice of him. He was accurate about it, which,
Ben Smith was in on the conversation, so it's a high-profile conversation. And they brought up the fact that you had resigned in protest from the Daily Caller because Tucker Carlson wouldn't let you criticize Fox News. And they said, that Mickey Kaus is a profile in courage. And then Ben Smith said, yeah, but have you ever seen his apartment? Did you stay for that part?
They didn't say any of that, but they
didn't.
It wasn't quitting in protest. What's the point of writing about politics if you can't cover one of the major players? It's ridiculous.
Oh, you're too modest, Mickey. You're a profile in courage.
Actually, my main beef, I bitch about Ben Smith had the job on being the small apartment.
Yep.
But you've hit on my main beef with him is he gave me no credit for that.
No credit for your small apartment?
No credit for my profile encouraged them.
Yeah, in fact, it sounded like he was about to change the subject when the phone rang. In fact, I think he may have quickly dialed the number to make the phone ring so he could change the subject. That was my feeling.
We'll get to Ben Smith.
In the Parrot room?
Or some point.
No, they should pay. People should have to pay to hear what you're going to say about
this op-ed by him on Jezebel Mag. I'm not going to say it was incredibly boring and badly written, Bob, but I'm not denying it either. Anyway,
it was a quasi excerpt from his book, Mickey. So it would be pretty.
If that's the best in his book,
I'll bet it's going to be a bestseller.
What can I say?
I bet if it's not,
it probably will be a bestseller for a while. Everything's a bestseller for a while.
Not true. Was your book a bestseller for a while?
Depends how you define bestseller.
So, Mickey,
so the news of the week is the Wagner guy saying, "Where is the fucking ammo?" Right?
He always says that. He's such a whiner.
He's going to withdraw from Bakhmut.
Why can't he be like those prisoners he sends to their death and just suffer stoically?
He's going to withdraw from Bakhmut, he said on Thursday.
Well, I'll tell you, it is taking them a while to wrap that thing up, isn't it? I mean, they still 7% of Bakhmut is still beyond their reach. Yeah, it was well, I wouldn't call that. I mean, that's interesting that they haven't been able to wrap it up. There's even some takes are that Ukraine's going to make it a point of counteroffensive when the counteroffensive begins. There are already, it looks like they're doing prep work for the counteroffensive. There have been drone strikes, a number of kind of oil depots or refineries in either Crimea or Russia proper on the other side of the border have gotten blown up in the last week or so. And this is oil that might well have been, ultimately been destined for the war zone. Then there was the weirdo, the drone strike on the Kremlin.
Yeah. What were you going to say was the main story? Sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, I didn't. I would say, to me, the most interesting Ukraine story was the Kremlin drone strike, just because it's such a mystery. It kind of makes sense. In theory, it would make sense as a false flag operation, except that it would be so kind of embarrassing for Putin. If he really feels he needs to rally public support to pave the way for a second mobilization, or to just make the recruiting go better, they've ramped up their recruiting drive. There's recruiting posters all over Moscow now, which there weren't a month or two ago. And if he feels he needs to make Russia feel imperiled, but most of the smart people on both pro-Russian, pro-Ukraine Twitter that I saw did not think it's a false flag. But on the other hand, it doesn't seem to me like Zelensky himself would authorize it. I assume the Biden people have made it clear that we don't welcome that kind of thing.
Well, weren't these assassinations that happened sort of freelance pro-Ukrainian people in theory?
Well, this is the intermediate possibility, is that it came from somebody in the Ukrainian government or military. The military is in some respects a decentralized thing and an ideologically diverse thing. So there are hardcore nationalists, I'm sure, who would like to do stuff like that if they could. You would think U.S. intelligence would know, for starters, did the drones come from Ukraine? Not that that's the only way Ukrainians could have done it. They could well have done something locally, I guess. But one reason people don't think it was a false flag is because it apparently took the Kremlin like 12 hours to say anything about it. Like, they weren't ready to capitalize. They ultimately, of course, claimed it was an assassination attempt on Putin, which is, the other theory is maybe that would help them legitimize, certain kinds of strikes that otherwise would be hard to legitimize. I don't know.
The picture of it was a little too cinematic. It was perfectly framed, and
was it?
It went off right at the top of whatever building it was attacking. It was very professionally done. One
of them went off, and it was unclear whether it was hit by anti-aircraft or it actually hit the top of that dome. I think apparently there was damage. There was some kind of fire damage to that.
There was more than one?
There were two. And in fact, one piece of misinformation was, it must have been a false flag operation because there were guys waiting on the roof. Well, first of all, if you did the false flag, I don't think you'd have the guys waiting on the roof. But the other thing is, the guys apparently got on the roof after the first strike, and then a second drone came. And they apparently somebody said they came from different directions. So I don't know. Weird.
That wasn't the big news of the week for me.
What was?
I thought the big news of the week was the possibility that the United States and China would team up and tell these people to negotiate a peace and get back in line and get the boys to quit it. And that was very encouraging. I thought that we would be open to that. And
you're hearing more
that
about
seems like a very good thing.
And was that a David Ignatius piece or what?
I didn't read a David Ignatius piece. I read some other piece about how Jake Sullivan is, open to it. Our president.
The administration is making more nice noises about China, including, I think, vibes of the kind you described. I don't know. We'll wait and see. It still looks like this counteroffensive's going to happen, and so.
Oh, the stories all admitted they're going to let the counteroffensive happen.
Yeah, well, then that just throws the wild card into everything.
They seem to feel the counteroffensive would help if it gained some ground. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, to me, it's just a roll of the dice. It could go in a lot of ways and have consequences we don't anticipate. Now, for my money, the good Ukraine-related news was that the Institute for the Study of War got busted.
Really?
Busted in a certain sense. So this is, this quote think tank. It was basically Neocon, arms industry funded think tank that has managed to make itself like the go-to source for like New York Times, Wall Street Journal, Washington Post. All these reporters, as a time saver, just take the ISW's daily updates of the war and assessments, and they give them credit. And I wrote a piece almost a year ago in the Nonzero newsletter pointing out that this is basically a propaganda operation, and they systematically distort what's actually going on in the war to kind of, exaggerating Ukrainian advances, downplaying Russian ones, and so on. But anyway, this week on Twitter, there'd always been rumblings about ISW. Of course, pro-Russia Twitter hates them. Even occasionally you'd hear something from pro-Ukraine analysts, but this week it kind of came to a head because these two guys with a big following, one a journalist, one more an intelligence analyst, and they're both pro-Ukraine, just kind of lit into them. And let me give one of them, Nathan Rooser, said on Twitter that ISW is, quote, becoming a major problem in the media ecosystem. This was actually what set this one off was ISW saying it's, quote, likely that the drone thing was a false flag operation, which is just nobody knows what's the like. It's a complete mystery. It's crazy. And there's many reasons that people have cited that it's, if anything, likely not to be one. But of course, ISW predictably is going to take that side. And then he said this bad opinion will, quote, be laundered as fact by many journalists who print what they say verbatim. There's a second journalist. I wrote all this up in today's Nonzero newsletter, but this guy, Neil Hauer, another pro-Ukraine guy, also with over 100,000 Twitter followers, said this ISW update is laughable. And more broadly, he talked about how ISW speculation is converted into, quote, confirmed info by legacy media reporting it. But here's the killer. After these guys had lit into them, and this one guy, Rooser, did a whole long thread. Michael Kaufman, like the most respected Russia military analyst in the West now, a guy who's not only pro-Ukraine, was born in Ukraine, quote tweets the pretty savage Rooser critique of ISW and just says, this is constructive criticism. In other words, he gave it a seal of approval. Right. And that freaked ISW out so much that they issued this whole long statement like, our methodology has come into blah, blah, blah. And it was just the statement's not noteworthy. But the point is that they were so stung by all this that Fantastic. They actually replied. This is just wonderful. Of course, what nobody said in the course of this is that ISW is ideologically driven. Now, that's still apparently either not understood or not something you're supposed to say.
It's run by somebody with the last name of Kagan. How could it be not understood?
Yeah, it is. It is part of what you've called the Kagan industrial complex. It is the wife of Fred Kagan, who is the brother of Bob Kagan and the brother-in-law of Victoria Nuland, and need we go on? It's
yeah, but anyway, that's good. That's good news. I had something to say, but I forgot it. Anyway,
no, I'm happy to just stop and savor this. Let's have a minute of silence, because look, I wrote this thing a year ago. It gets like zero pickup. I mean, I guess Responsible Statecraft reran it, and so it wasn't nothing. But I mean, the frustrating thing is, New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal just it's like, oh, don't get me started. It's like,
I know what I would say. It reminds me of the Hunter Biden letter, which is you get a bunch of people who say, oh, this is probably a false flag. Just the way somebody put together a bunch of intelligence guys to say this has all the earmarks of Russian disinformation. And then it becomes accepted as fact, even though it's bullshit.
Right. And these guys were citing other examples, not just the, there have been 2 other cases within recent weeks where ISW was overstating Ukrainian territorial gains, making a big deal of things that were nothing and so on. But yeah, that's the game. And works.
So
apparently.
Soon somebody in the MSM will take it up, and then you'll be sick of it and have to come up with something new.
I would be happy to be relieved of the responsibility.
You'll be tired of winning. That's great. So we have other things to talk about.
Certainly. In the there's AI stuff. There's pop culture stuff.
There's Tucker stuff.
Oh, Tucker. What's the? Is it? Wait. Is it?
There's DeSantis stuff, which is, I have things to say about the Disney lawsuit, and
say it.
And there's also his legislative juggernaut, which he just ended. All the things he got passed through the legislature. Really an impressive amount of stuff, some of which I agree with, some of which I disagree with. There's Epstein stuff, a bunch of new names, including your boy, Reid Hoffman. Yes.
Bill Burns.
Right, in between jobs. Your friend Neera Tanden is now took Susan Rice's place as the head of the Domestic Policy Council. I'm sure you're happy about that.
Mickey is using the term friend ironically.
My main beef with Neera Tanden is, your main beef is that she was very clumsily doing the bid of the Israeli lobby at one point. I
have 2 things. She totally did cave when she was president of Center for American Progress, and both AIPAC and the Anti-Defamation League brought down the hammer about how the think tank was covering Iran, and actually had lunch with her or whatever. Right. And she totally caved. But then she was also, my one run-in with her on Twitter was that was when it was resistance mania on her part, when she was making a big deal of something that I think she was making some big Russiagate point that didn't make any sense or something. That's the only actual interaction I personally have had with her.
Well, she was a manic resistor on Twitter, and it obviously paid off for her because she's got a big job at the White House now. I sort of enjoyed the fact that she was unhinged on Twitter. Joe Manchin didn't, which is why the Senate wouldn't confirm her. But my main beef with her is when Ben Smith came out with his hatchet job, she said, "This is exactly what journalism should be," or she tweeted something like that, which was really annoying.
Well, so anyway, by the way, she was actually, her Twitter behavior, I think, got her denied one White House job.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Senate confirmation.
That's what I meant.
But she has another one, or
well, this doesn't require Senate confirmation. So
what is her job now?
She replaced Susan Rice as head of the Domestic Policy Council, or she's the domestic, whatever the equivalent of the National Security Advisor is. She's domestically the counterpart.
It's like the NSC head, except it sounds like actually very little power, right? I mean, National Security Advisor is an actually important position. Is this an actually important
Susan
position?
Rice had real power, so there's no reason to, I mean, she failed to control the left wingers on immigration, or the activists on immigration, but she tried, and I guess ultimately she sort of had to approve of whatever course they took. But I think you have some power. I guess much less than in the national security sphere.
Well, it's all up to the president. In some administrations, the Secretary of State has most of foreign policy power, and others the National Security Advisor does. It's not like it's a formal question so much as but usually the NSC head has a lot of real power.
Well, the Tucker thing was, this text came out where he said, he saw 3 guys, presumably Proud Boys, I don't know who, beating up on some Antifa kid of unspecified race. And he didn't like it because this isn't how white men fight. And that was supposed to be such a damning racist comment, and it implies that he sort of thinks in sort of racial pride terms that are sort of really
well, go ahead and finish your take. I have a take.
Not kosher. But the whole point of the thing was a Shirley Sherrod-like speech where he eventually comes to realize he's wrong and he should sympathize with the kid being beaten up, even though he's Antifa. And as somebody said, it sounded like the first draft of a Tucker talk, and so it just wasn't that bad. He ended on a redemptive, self-redemptive, and self-aggrandizing note. Oh, isn't it great? I can empathize with the guy being beaten up, but it still just wasn't that bad.
No, anyway, I think it was. I think it was actually both. I mean, so here's the thing. The story was, I think Fox has been like leaking things to explain why they fired Tucker, and it's various kinds of things. And this was one, and it was a message in which he said, this is not the way white men fight, by which he meant white men don't gang up on people. Tell that to Emmett Till, for example. But that's his line, is that white guys don't gang up on people. Whereas, by implication, clearly what he means is people with dark skin do fight unfairly, but white men don't fight unfairly. So that's why I think it's a creepy as shit thing to say, and it's weird. And I'm trying to figure out how he came to talk like that. It's just weird and creepy, and I think sick. But when I read the whole thing, I was struck, as you were, that the overall narrative in it was. The rest of the narrative was very laudable. It was like he was saying, when I first saw them beating up this Antifa guy, I thought, yeah, go get him. And then I thought, oh no, whatever there, but for the grace of God, whatever he said, the rest was great. But still, none of that excuses the one, I think, very strange line. Do you know anybody who talks like that, Mickey? Who says, who when they complain about somebody ganging up on somebody else, they would say, that's not the way white people behave. Who do you know? Who would you associate with? Who would you socialize with who you've heard say something like that?
Oh, very few people. There are a couple. I socialize with a lot of right-wingers. Not going to say. But
well, I would not. I would not socialize.
Nobody but it's not a good way of thinking. I agree. It's the way of thinking of somebody who's seen a whole lot of videos of black people beating up white people. Even most of them aren't gangs of people. But anyway, yes, it's a bad way of thinking, and you're right about the troubling implication that black people do fight like this. So that was.
It isn't even a question of. It's just weird. It's just, I'm literally trying to figure out when he got that way of thinking. Like, did his father talk like that? Did he, it came through as a very natural expression of himself.
He's talking in private on Twitter. Not talking in public. So that's when these thoughts would come out. I think people, you do cut people some slack for very weird thoughts. But
it was the racial pride vibe. It was the racial pride vibe that, in a way, kind of, I find as troubling as anything else. Just that's the way it goes through life. I'm part of the white tribe. We have this whole code. It's weird.
Yeah, I'm not going to deny that. I work for the guy. I never saw that. It would be something very private. Although some text came out of him talking to his brother where he was talking a whole other language that he would never talk about in public. So
what was that kind of stuff? What kind of language?
It was sort of objectifying women, and it used the word, it accepted the word spooge.
I didn't even know what that means. You can explain it in the Parrot room.
It means jism mob.
Yeah, but see, that kind of talk was so commonplace in my generation in the high school locker room or whatever that shocks me less. I don't know.
Good point. No, good point. This is something alien to.
Yeah, that is an actual
both of
change.
Our lives.
Right.
But and it has. I think it has taken hold in some. It's very, very tiny minority, and it's weird that one of them is a broadcaster for the leading TV show in the country.
I mean, one reason it struck me is because there is this whole question of like, how authentic are his various beliefs? Because, you know, it certainly came out in the emails and so on that he didn't believe everything he was saying on Fox, including.
Well, he might not have believed that either. He might have been trying to.
See, that's what I mean.
He might have been trying to suck up. He might have been trying to suck up to supposed racists at Fox News who was texting.
Who was he texting? Who was he texting?
I don't know who he was texting.
Anyway,
I have a feeling most of his texts were with Bret Baier, but I may be wrong. Who's the good guy at Fox?
Yeah, I wouldn't think Bret Baier would be a natural audience for that.
Anyway, that's the new approach to conventional wisdom about Tucker, which I can't discount, is it's all the board panicking about holy crap, we haven't done our jobs. We haven't controlled Tucker. We haven't controlled January 6th. We haven't controlled the Dominion election fraud. We're losing $1 billion. We look really bad here, and we have to find a scapegoat to blame. And Tucker was one who a lot of people wanted to shoot anyway, and so he got the brunt of it. And the board looks better now. I don't know. That made sense to me. The board only has like 5 or 8 people on it. It's a tiny board. And
so do you have any more insight into what he's going to do? One thing Ben Smith was saying that he's contractually obliged to basically say nothing about Fox until his contract expires.
Well, apparently that's up to negotiation. It's only if he takes the money is he object. If he takes
that kind of money you take. It's $20 million a year, right?
Suppose he says, I'll take $10 million, and that's the negotiation. I'll take $10 million, but like I mentioned, Fox. It's a negotiation, so it's not ironclad that he's going to be. I think he's going to find that his options are much less appealing than everybody says they are. And by far the best option is to run for president. I mean, it's by far the most fun. He would have a ball. He would either have an impact or not. I think he would have a big impact. And, that's a lot better than having your own Substack or, going to one of these lesser networks or staging a presidential debate where you moderate. I mean, so what? He stages a presidential debate. Then what does he do? It's also true that his shelf life is fading away. I mean, he can't just sit around for 2 years and expect to come back, with all the notoriety that he has now. He has to strike while the iron is hot, I think. I did note, in that video he did right after he was fired, when he kind of, I guess, couldn't say anything about the firing or didn't want to. We talked last time about whether if he ran, it would be third party or what. That seemed to be paving the way more for third party. Did you note the part about both parties or whatever bad thing he said about them? All right. Well, that makes sense. It's hard to imagine him as the no labels candidate, but
I don't think that's what he means. He means Pat Buchanan.
Could be. It's hard. That's possible. I mean, he'd have to start raising some money. I think it's, you have to fight a battle in all 50 states to get on the ballot, and you'll win. But that takes a lot of money. You have to pay a lot of the lawyers.
But he would start with a lot of free media, and that can get the money coming in because it can get you to credible poll numbers. He would probably he'd start with credible poll numbers. And at that point, I think you can raise money. You
should probably like that, because I just thinking right now about it, he steals more votes from
totally
Trump and DeSantis than he does from Biden.
Well, as I said last week, the reason I think he might not run third party is because then he could be condemned for destroying the Trumpist chances in general.
Yeah. Of course, you could always at the last minute drop out and endorse somebody.
I think I said that too. That was part of it. And he saves the day and, I don't know, becomes vice president or something in exchange. Who knows? Secretary of State, God forbid. Oh, well.
Yeah, I don't think so. Well, something that doesn't require management and actually running the government will be good, judging from his having worked for him at the Daily Caller.
Right.
I mean, Bill Clinton is not, he doesn't like to fire people or give people bad news. So that much he has in common with Bill Clinton, who wanted to fire Rahm Emanuel and didn't, and as a result, Rahm Emanuel stayed. But Bill Clinton exercised sort of a micromanagement of the government that Tucker would not do. So and Ron DeSantis obviously exercised a lot of control of his government. Do we have time to talk about his list of accomplishments?
No, I mean, the alarm actually went off. You can do it if you want, but we're 3 minutes.
No, we can talk about it in the Parrot room. We can talk about it in the Parrot room.
So Parrot room, patreon.com/Parrot room. And there's actually a lot to talk about this week. Gordon Lightfoot. I'll give you the Gordon Lightfoot one question trivia quiz, which you will possibly fail. We're going to discuss the Ed Sheeran case. You're going to render a definitive verdict on whether he ripped that off. He was acquitted, but whether he ripped that off from acquitted is probably not the word since it was a civil suit. But whether he ripped off, let's get it on. You're right about Epstein. Stuff to talk about. There's AI stuff. I wrote.
I know. I like that.
You read it? You read it?
Yes. I hyped it on Twitter, Bob. Gee, you don't understand
all on Twitter.
All the little things I do for you. You have no appreciation.
I just want to take this opportunity to thank you. I didn't know you did. Did you name check me? Did you put Robert Ryder in the tweet?
I linked to it. I mean, what? Who cares if I name check you?
Well, because if you didn't, that's why I didn't know about it. But if you did, I should go check Twitter.
You don't read my Twitter feed religiously?
Do I go to the Mickey Kaus Twitter feed every day and see what you're saying?
Yes.
Are you serious?
The
answer would be no. The answer would be no.
There's Disney.
You mean DeSantis/Disney?
DeSantis versus Disney. I have things to say about that.
Yeah.
And there's a bunch of other little stuff. Some of it interesting, some of it not. But we can dispense with it quickly.
Okay.
And the Chevron case, Bob, you're interested in the Chevron case?
Sounds fascinating.
Relaxing the laws against child labor. I'm sort of half for that.
I want to briefly talk. We can talk about Blue Sky, the new Twitter rival, and also about Elon Musk's subtle pricing strategy. Subtle Tesla pricing strategy.
Okay. There are things to say about EVs. Yeah. There are always things to say about EVs. Yeah. EVs and artificial intelligence, hardy perennial topics.
Yep.
Okay.
They're always there for you. Okay. So we're off to
we will take the parrot out of its plastic bag.
Oh my God. It looks like it's ready for burial or something. What happened to that parrot?
It will come to life.
Get that bird out of there.
It's suspended animation. It will come to life.
Okay.
Okay. Here we go. Here it's coming to life right now. Here I am.
That was very effective. Thank you, Mickey. Okay.
See you later.
See you folks there.